At 3 a.m. on the ranch, I was jolted awake by a noise, and when I looked out the window, I saw my daughter-in-law burying something in my yard with a flashlight. When she left, I dug it up and almost fainted when I saw what it was. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it's reached. That night, the silence of my ranch was shattered by a strange noise. I woke up with a start, my eyes burning and my heart hammering in my chest. The wall clock, that old antique that had been in my family for generations, kept on ticking, its hands pointing to almost 3 in the morning. Outside, the darkness was thick. Only the pale moonlight slipped through a crack in the curtain, casting strips of icy silver across the wood floor. I held still, trying to listen, but that dry, scratching sound kept coming from the garden like someone was digging at the earth with something sharp. On this remote ranch deep in the heart of Texas, a strange noise at this hour is never a good sign. The dogs outside suddenly started barking, short, sharp, alert barks, as if they could smell something was wrong too. My heart seized up and a chill ran down my spine. I've lived 66 years, and I've seen it all out in these parts, from storms that ripped the roofs off to cattle rustlers in the dead of night. But I'd never felt as uneasy as I did right then, like an invisible hand was squeezing my throat. I quickly threw on my old wool shawl, the one my mother knit for me before she passed, and tiptoed to the window. With my bare feet trembling on the cold wood, I pulled the curtain back, just enough to leave a crack, just enough to see without being seen. Under the moonlight, a silhouette appeared, blurry in the night mist. I held my breath, straining my eyes to recognize it. It was Sarah, my daughter-in-law. She was standing there alone, near the old wooden fence at the edge of the garden. In one hand, she held a small flashlight, its weak beam darting back and forth across the ground. In the other, she gripped a shovel, which she drove hard into the soft earth with firm movements, as if she was used to it. At her feet, a black burlap sack lay on the ground, bulging strangely, as if it held something heavy and hard inside. I saw it and felt like my heart was going to leap out of my chest. What was Sarah doing out there at this hour? Why was she digging? And what was in that sack that had her sneaking around? I saw her glance back at the house, her shoulders tense, like a wild animal afraid of being caught. Every time the flashlight beam passed over her face, I could see the sweat glinting on her temple, even though the night was bone-chilling. She started digging faster with rushed, almost desperate movements. When the hole was deep enough, Sarah knelt, quickly tossed the black sack in, and started throwing dirt back on top. Her shoveling had a steady rhythm, but I could hear her ragged breathing in the silence of the night. I behind the curtain was frozen stiff, my chest aching from holding my breath for so long. I wanted to scream at her, to run out and ask what she was doing, but my feet felt nailed to the floor. Something about the way Sarah moved, her coldness, her determination, scared me. This wasn't the sweet daughter-in-law I knew, the one who laughed with joy when she was pregnant with Annie, the one who used to sit with me in the kitchen, learning how to make the family's brisket recipe. When she finished filling the hole, Sarah even carefully stomped down the fresh dirt, as if to erase any trace. She grabbed a handful of dry grass and scattered it over the top, camouflaging it perfectly. Then, as if nothing had happened, she turned off the flashlight, pulled her hood tightly over her head, and walked silently toward the house. Under the pale moon, her shadow looked like a ghost, gliding smoothly but leaving behind a fear in me I couldn't name. I waited until I heard the door to her room close softly, until the sound of the deadbolt echoed in the darkness. Only then did I dare to let out my breath. But it came out shaky, as if I was the one who had just done something wrong. I couldn't stay in bed anymore. The image of Sarah digging that hole, that strangely bulging black sack, kept turning over and over in my mind. I had to know. I had to know what she had buried. I snuck out into the yard, my bare feet stepping on the ice-cold night dew. With trembling hands, I grabbed the small hose that Ethan, my son, always used for the garden. I found the exact spot where the earth was freshly turned, where Sarah had been standing. The dirt was still damp, soft, easy to dig. But with every scoop I took, My heart beat harder, like a war drum. I was afraid of what I would find, but I couldn't stop. I needed the truth, no matter how terrible it was. After a few layers of dirt, the tip of the hoe hit something hard. I knelt and used my hands to dig, my nails digging into the cold earth. I pulled out the black sack, my heart pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. My shaking hands unzipped it, and then I froze. Inside the sack was a kitchen knife, its steel blade stained with something thick, dark red that gleamed in the moonlight. Next to the knife was a shirt, one of those work shirts Ethan wore, stained with horrible dark red patches. The iron smell of blood hit me all at once and my stomach turned. My head was spinning like the whole world was collapsing. The air caught in my throat, and I fell to my knees on the cold, damp earth. Everything went blurry, and the darkness swallowed me whole. When I woke up, the dew had soaked through my shawl. It was still dark. Luckily, no one had seen me lying there, passed out next to that awful hole. Shaking, I tried to get up on all fours. My hands, still covered in dirt, quickly put the knife and shirt back in the sack, and I covered the hole again, just as it was. I didn't want Sarah to know I'd seen anything. Not yet. I needed time to think, to understand what was happening. But as I shoveled the dirt, each scoop felt like a knife twisting in my heart. I walked back to my room, stumbling, my feet as heavy as lead. I collapsed onto the bed, my whole body ice cold, as if my blood had stopped flowing. A horrible thought lodged itself in my mind, as sharp as the knife I had just seen. That night, Ethan, my son, hadn't come home. He always came home no matter how late it was. He would never leave me and Annie, my granddaughter, without letting us know. But that night, the house was terrifyingly silent. The only sounds were the ticking of the clock and my own heart, beating like it was about to burst. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight slipped through the cracks in the wooden door, drawing faint lines of light on the kitchen floor. I was standing there, trying to hold down the fear churning inside me, while my trembling hands stirred the pot of grits on the stove. The smell of corn, which on other days brought me peace, couldn't shake the chill that clung to my body now. On the table, there was only a single cup of cold coffee, the old ceramic mug Ethan used every morning. Sarah had gotten up very early, earlier than me, which she almost never did. I could hear the clatter of plates in the sink, where Sarah was washing the dishes meticulously. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from shaking, from cracking. "What about Ethan, honey? Did he not come home to sleep last night?" Sarah didn't turn around. Her back went stiff and her hands paused for a second before she resumed scrubbing. Her voice came out flat, as if she'd rehearsed it. "We had a fight, Mom. He got angry and left." Her words were soft, but they felt false, like she was reading from a script. I stood there, feeling a stone weighing down my chest. A fight? Ethan wasn't one to get angry easily, not the type to leave the house in the middle of the night without a word. My son, no matter how mad he got, would always call or at least leave me a note. I swallowed hard, trying to make my voice sound calm, more like a curious mother than a suspicious one. "And what did you fight about, Sarah? Was it that bad?" I moved closer, pretending to grab a rag to wipe the table, but my eyes never left her back. Sarah stopped washing the dishes, but still didn't turn around. "It was nothing, Mom," she replied in that same flat voice, as if trying to brush off my question. "It's not worth you worrying about." And she went back to washing, faster now, as if wanting to end the conversation. I stayed quiet, feeling an invisible wall go up between us. The Sarah from before, the daughter-in-law who would sit beside me and tell me about her hometown in Oklahoma. The one who would laugh out loud when I taught her how to make tamales, now seemed like a stranger. I left the kitchen, walking slowly, but inside a storm was raging. I was afraid that if I stayed another second, I wouldn't be able to stop myself from yelling at her, from asking her about the black sack, the knife, the red stains. But I couldn't, not yet. If she knew I'd seen, that I was suspicious, I wasn't sure what would happen. I passed by Ethan and Sarah's room. The door was ajar. I pushed it open gently and went inside. The old queen-sized bed, where they both slept, was only sunken on one side, the blanket neatly folded. Ethan's side was cold, with no sign that he had slept there last night. On the nightstand, Ethan's phone, the thing he was never without, was also gone. My stomach twisted. I remembered the nights when Ethan was a boy, when he'd run a high fever, and I'd sit by his bed, holding his hand until he fell into a peaceful sleep. And now, here I was, in my own son's room, feeling as if he had vanished from my life. I went out to the yard looking for some air to breathe. The morning sun was hitting the garden, right on the spot where, just hours before, I had dug up Sarah's horrible secret. A few chickens were scratching around, pecking right over last night's hole. My heart leapt and I shooed them away quickly, afraid Sarah might notice. I looked around, checking to see if anyone was watching, and then walked toward the corral. Everything was quiet, but the manger was empty. Ethan was always the one to feed the cows every morning. He never missed it. His absence was a painful reminder, stabbing deep into my heart. I went to the well to draw water, like always, but my hands were shaking so much I couldn't keep my balance. The bucket tipped and water spilled all over the yard, soaking my old sandals. I just stood there, watching the puddle spread, feeling completely useless. Just then, Sarah came out, a grocery bag hanging from her shoulder. She saw the puddle at my feet, frowned slightly and said in a cold voice, "Be careful, Mom. Don't fall." And without waiting for an answer, she continued, "I have to go to the market to buy a few things," and left in a hurry, her steps quick as if she were running away. I watched her go, my heart in a knot. Sarah wasn't just avoiding me. She was hiding something, and I knew it had to do with Ethan. I sank onto the front step, my face in my hands, trying to hold back the tears that wanted to fall. Just then, Johnny, the milk boy, stopped his bike in front of the gate. He smiled, his voice carefree. "Is Mr. Ethan not around today, ma'am?" "He's always out for the milk this time of day." That innocent question was like a stab to the heart. I avoided his eyes, paid him quickly, and said in a shaky voice, "Oh, he had to run an errand today." Johnny nodded and pedaled away, but I just stood there, feeling like my world was caving in. I went back to Ethan's room, as if the room itself could give me an answer. His closet was the same, his shirts neatly folded, but I noticed several of the work shirts he wore on the ranch were missing. On his desk, a pile of papers with half-finished notes caught my eye. Ethan's handwriting rushed, full of cross-outs. I picked them up, trembling, and read the stray words. "Can't take it anymore. Divorce, custody of Annie." Those words were like daggers straight to my heart. I clutched the papers to my chest, my legs went weak, and I had to grab the desk to keep from falling. Ethan, my son, had been thinking about a divorce. The fight Sarah mentioned wasn't nothing. It was a deep crack, a secret that I, his own mother, had no idea about. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. Lying in my old wooden bed, I stared at the ceiling where slivers of moonlight seeped through the roof tiles. The image of the black sack, the knife with its horrible red stains, and Ethan's stray words about divorce spun in my head, a relentless whirlwind. I wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding, that Sarah, the daughter-in-law I had grown to love like my own child, couldn't have done something so terrible. But my heart, a mother's heart, kept screaming at me that something was terribly wrong. I clutched my chest, trying to shake the feeling of suffocation, but it clung to me, like the cold dew seeping through the fabric of my nightgown. And then sometime after midnight, a loud thud came from Sarah's room, like a wooden chair had been knocked over. The sound cut through the silence of the night and made me jump, sitting bolt upright. Right after, a piercing scream tore through the air, filled with panic, mixed with muffled groans, like someone was covering her mouth. My heart went wild, the blood roaring in my ears. I knew instantly it was Sarah's voice. What was happening to her? Was it a nightmare or something worse? I quickly threw on my shawl, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it on the floor. As I stepped into the hallway, I felt the cold wood on my bare feet, but that cold was nothing compared to the fear gripping my heart. The door to Sarah's room was ajar, a line of yellow light from the kerosene lamp escaping onto the floor, drawing a thin stripe. I stopped, pressed my ear to the cold wood of the door and tried to listen. I heard Sarah's ragged breathing mixed with words she was murmuring in her sleep. "Don't make me. If I didn't do it, you were going to take everything. No, please don't." Her voice trembled, but it was filled with desperation, as if she were pleading with an invisible ghost. Every word she spoke was like a razor in my heart. Take everything. What? And who was she referring to with, "Please don't"? I thought of Ethan, of my son's absence, and a new terror seized me. Could these words have something to do with the black sack I dug up last night? My trembling hand rested on the door and I pushed it open a little. Inside, the dim light of the lamp illuminated Sarah, curled up in a ball on the bed, sweat soaking her long black hair. Her hands were flailing in the air as if trying to push away an unseen enemy. The glass of water on the nightstand had fallen over, and the water was spreading in a small puddle on the wooden floor, shimmering in the weak light. Suddenly, Sarah sat up with a jolt, her eyes wide open, staring at the empty wall in front of her. Then she let out another scream, sharp and full of fear, as if she had just seen something horrifying. That scream startled me. I almost dropped my shawl. I couldn't stay outside any longer. I went in and put a hand on her shoulder, shaking her gently. "Sarah, what's wrong?" "It's okay, honey." She jumped and whipped around to face me. For a second, her eyes were empty, as if she didn't recognize me. Then she blinked and stammered, It was just a nightmare, Mom." Her voice was shaky, but I saw the panic in her eyes. She hurried to roll up the sweat-soaked sheet and stuffed it into the laundry basket in the corner, her movements quick, as if trying to hide something. I stood there, trying to look calm, but my eyes unintentionally drifted to the sleeve of her white nightgown. A blurry, brownish stain like mud was on her wrist. My heart sank. Could it be dirt from last night's hole, or just some random stain? I wanted to ask her, wanted to scream at her, but I knew if I did, I would tip her off. Sarah tried to force a smile and walked quickly to the table, picking up the cell phone that had fallen under the bed. She quickly slipped it into the pocket of her robe, as if afraid I might see something on the screen. "Mom, you should get some rest," she said, trying to make her voice sound normal, but I heard the tension in every word. "I'm fine, it was just a silly dream." I nodded without saying anything because I knew staying wouldn't get me anywhere. I left silently, but just as I closed the door, I heard the sound of the deadbolt. Sarah had locked it as if she was afraid I would come back. That sound, small but sharp, was like a confirmation that she was hiding something from me. I went back to my room, but Sarah's scream kept echoing in my head like a half-confession. I sat on the bed, hugging my chest, trying to take deep breaths to calm myself. But how could I be calm? The scattered pieces started coming together in my mind. The knife, the stained shirt, Ethan's notes about the divorce, and now, Sarah's nightmare. Everything seemed to be leading me to a truth I didn't dare face. By dusk the next day, the Texas sky was stained a fiery orange, as if the whole world were trying to comfort me with a little warmth in the middle of the storm raging inside me. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of beans, trying to let the familiar smell of home cooking soothe the fear that was eating me alive. But every time I lifted the pot, my hands trembled, as if the horrible secret from the garden was still weighing on my fingers. Sarah called on the phone while I was chopping an onion, her voice rushed and dry. "You and Annie go ahead and eat, Mom. I have an errand to run in town. I'll probably be late." I just said okay, but inside everything twisted. Again, Sarah was leaving without a clear explanation. I looked out the window, where the sun was setting, and wondered where she was going, who with, and if it had anything to do with Ethan's absence. I set the table, a simple dinner of pinto beans, tortillas, and a plate of sliced tomatoes. The yellow light from the kerosene lamp hanging from the ceiling lit the table. Stretching my shadow and Annie's across the old wooden wall, Annie, my 6-year-old granddaughter, sat across from me, her little eyes shining like two marbles, eating her soup with an innocence that broke my heart. Seeing her was a comfort, but at the same time it hurt. She was the only light in these dark days. but I couldn't shake the fear that she too was being pulled into the whirlwind of secrets Sarah was weaving. I served Annie more beans, trying to make my voice sound gentle, like a casual question. I wonder what's keeping your mommy so busy lately that she's going out so much. Sweetheart. I smiled at her, but it must have been a forced smile. Because my lips felt stiff, Annie looked up. Her mouth still smudged with soup, and answered matter-of-factly, "Maybe she went with the man from the other day again." "Grandma." Her words, light as the wind, hit me like a thunderclap on a clear day. My spoon froze in midair. I almost dropped a bowl of beans. I tried to stay calm, took a deep breath, and asked again, my voice trembling, "What man, my love?" Annie nodded, stirring her spoon with her little hands, as if telling a fun story. "A few days ago, Mommy took me for a walk with a man I didn't know. He was really tall and smelled really nice, like cologne. And he gave me candy, Grandma, really yummy candy. He said he wanted to be my new daddy, but I told him no, I only like my daddy, Ethan." The little girl smiled from ear to ear, as if she were telling the funniest story in the world. But I felt a bitter lump in my throat, like I'd just swallowed a mouthful of ice water. A strange man, saying he wanted to be Annie's daddy? My granddaughter's innocent words were like a knife twisting deep in my heart. I looked at Annie's bright smile, and my heart ached like never before. The child had no idea her words had just shattered the little act Sarah had put on. I wanted to hug her tight, wanted to scream that no one could replace Ethan, but all I could do was stroke her head, trying to hide my trembling hand. "Oh, really?" I said, my voice faint. "And does your mommy go out with that man often?" Annie nodded, still oblivious. "A few times now, Grandma. Mommy told me not to tell Daddy because he'd get mad. But I can tell you, right, Grandma?" She looked up at me, her round eyes full of trust. I nodded, but inside I wanted to break down and cry. Annie, my little granddaughter, was caught in a secret she didn't understand, and I, her grandmother, felt helpless, not knowing what to do to protect her. Just then there was a knock at the door. I jumped, quickly wiped my hands on my apron, and went to open it. It was Mrs. Gable, my kind neighbor, with a basket of eggs, a few feathers still stuck to them. She smiled warmly, but her eyes were full of concern. "Brought you some eggs, neighbor, fresh from this morning." Then she leaned close to my ear and whispered, as if afraid someone might overhear, "Last night, I saw your Sarah at the gate with a man I don't know, and he had a car, you know, not Ethan's pickup truck. It seemed very strange, so I wanted to tell you." Mrs. Gable's words were like an icy wind that made me shiver. I gripped the basket of eggs tightly, feeling a coldness run down my spine. "Thank you, Mrs. Gable," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. I'm sure it was just a friend. But we both knew that wasn't the truth. Mrs. Gable had barely left when Sarah arrived. I heard the scuff of her sandals in the yard, and then the door opened. She came in carrying a bag of vegetables, her face a little tired but trying to force a smile. Seeing me standing there, she quickly came inside, saying in a sociable voice, "Thanks, Mrs. Gable. You're always so kind." But when Mrs. Gable was gone, I caught the look in Sarah's eyes as cold as ice, that she shot me for an instant before turning to put her things away. That look sent a chill through me, as if she was sizing me up, trying to guess how much I knew. Annie, innocent as a little bird, ran to her mother, shouting happily, "Mommy, I told Grandma about the man who's going to be my new daddy." Sarah froze. The bag of vegetables fell from her hands with a thud, and a few tomatoes rolled across the floor. She bent down quickly to pick them up, but I saw her hands were shaking and her face was filled with panic. "Mom, Mom," she turned to me, stammering. "He's just an old friend. He's a big kidder. I'm sure the little one misunderstood him." She laughed, but her laugh was forced. She couldn't hide the tension in her eyes. "Annie, don't you go around saying things like that anymore, you hear?" she said to the little girl in a tone harsher than usual. Annie blinked, confused, then said in a small voice, "Yes, Mommy, sorry." The air in the kitchen grew heavy, as if the whole room was holding its breath. I stood there still holding the basket of eggs, trying to look calm, but inside everything was crumbling. Annie's innocent words, Mrs. Gable's whisper, Sarah's cold stare. They were all pieces that were slowly forming a horrifying picture. I was sure that what Annie said wasn't a child's fantasy. There was a strange man, one that Sarah didn't want me or Ethan to know existed. And if this man really existed, did he have something to do with the knife, the shirt, and my son's disappearance? The next afternoon, while I was sweeping the yard, I heard the scuff of Mrs. Gable's sandals, my good neighbor. She came through the gate, a small bowl in her hand, and said cheerfully, "Neighbor, can I borrow a little sugar? I'm all out at my house." I nodded, trying to smile. But when I went into the kitchen for the sugar, Mrs. Gable pulled me into a hidden corner near the fence. She lowered her voice and whispered, full of concern, "Listen, last night I saw your Sarah at the gate again with a strange man. They were arguing about something pretty heated, talking so loud I could hear them from my house. Then the man put her in a car, one of those shiny new cars, and drove her away. It wasn't Ethan's pickup, I'm sure of it." Mrs. Gable's words were like a punch to the gut. I gripped the broom handle so tight my knuckles turned white. I tried to keep my voice from shaking. And did you get a good look at the man's face, neighbor?" Mrs. Gable shook her head, her expression apologetic. "It was too dark. I only saw his silhouette." "But listen to me, neighbor, this isn't right. You be very careful." I nodded and thanked her. But when Mrs. Gable left, I had to grab the fence to keep from falling over. A strange man arguing with Sarah and a car. Those details were like pieces of a puzzle that were slowly fitting together, painting a picture I didn't dare to see. I thought about what Annie had told me about the new daddy, and a new fear, sharp as the knife I dug up, took hold of me. That night, I prepared dinner with a heavy heart. Annie was playing in the yard, her bright laughter echoing all around, but it couldn't calm the storm inside me. Sarah came home late, walking into the kitchen with a distracted look, her eyes glued to her cell phone. She sat at the table but didn't even touch the plate of food I'd served her. Instead, she was constantly texting, a little smile playing on her lips, as if she were talking to someone who made her happy. Seeing that smile filled me with a rage that welled up inside, but I held it back, biting my lip to keep from blurting out the questions that were burning in my mind. Annie, innocent as ever, looked up from her plate of beans and asked in her clear little voice, "Mommy, is Daddy coming home for dinner tonight?" The child's innocent question was like a stone dropped into a still pond. Sarah jumped, nearly dropping her phone. She shot me a look, sharp as a razor, for an instant before turning to Annie and saying curtly, "Eat your food. You ask too many questions." Her voice was harsher than usual, and Annie blinked, pressing her lips together, not daring to say another word. I continued clearing the plates in silence, but inside the sea was rough. Sarah wasn't just hiding something from me. She was afraid of being found out. Annie's question, though innocent, seemed to have touched a nerve she desperately wanted to conceal. After dinner, I went out to the back porch to draw water, looking for some air to breathe. Night fell, blanketing the ranch in darkness, with only the pale light of the moon and the chirping of crickets to be heard. As I passed by Sarah's room, I saw a sliver of light coming from under the door. I stopped, not meaning to, but I caught her whispers. Sarah's voice was low, almost inaudible, but every word hit me like a hammer blow. "You don't worry. Nobody suspects a thing. Don't call me anymore. It's too dangerous." I stood frozen, my heart racing, feeling the blood turn to ice in my veins. Who was she talking to? And what was this about it being dangerous? I wanted to push the door open and go in, wanted to scream at her and ask what she was hiding, but my feet felt nailed to the floor. I knew that if I acted rashly, I could put myself and Annie in danger. I returned to my room in silence and closed the door, but sleep wouldn't come. Lying in bed, tossing and turning, the scattered images from the last few days began to appear, fitting together in a perfect, horrifying way. The knife and the shirt stained with that awful red, buried in the garden. Sarah's scream in her nightmare like a confession. Annie's innocent story about the new daddy. And now, Mrs. Gable's gossip about the strange man, along with Sarah's secret phone call. They were all pieces leading me to a truth I didn't want to believe. It was very possible that Ethan, my son, had been killed, and that the culprit was none other than Sarah. A few days later, I forced myself to go to the town market as usual to buy a few things for Annie. I couldn't let myself fall apart. I couldn't let the child see her grandmother looking weak. Every step I took away from the ranch felt heavy, as if I were carrying a stone on my back. The horrible images, the knife with the ghastly red stain, the stained shirt, Sarah's scream in her nightmare, and Annie's innocent tale of the new daddy clung to me like shadows I couldn't shake. I clutched the rosary I kept in my blouse pocket, praying under my breath for the strength to keep going, even though all I wanted to do was scream and go search for Ethan, for my son. The town market was as noisy as ever, with the shouts of vendors, the haggling of shoppers, and the smell of fresh corn cakes mixing with that of fresh vegetables. I stopped in front of Elena's stall, trying to focus on picking out tomatoes, but my hands were shaking so much that I dropped one on the ground. Elena laughed, her voice cheerful. "What's wrong, ma'am? You're so jumpy. What worry has got you like this?" I just gave her a weak smile, not answering, because how could I tell her what was suffocating my heart? I continued picking out vegetables, trying to lose myself in the crowd to forget, even for a minute, the fear that was eating me alive. And then, as I was choosing some potatoes, I heard a few nearby vendors start whispering together. The voice of Carmen, the fruit lady, came through loud and clear. "They say that Mr. Miller, the other day when he was grazing his cows, found a man all beaten up in that vacant lot by the highway to San Antonio. It's a miracle he was still breathing. They took him to the hospital, but they say it's been 2 days and no one has come to identify him." Poor thing. Those words were like a thunderclap that exploded in my head. The basket fell from my hands with a thud, and the tomatoes and potatoes went rolling everywhere. The vendors turned to look at me curious, but I paid them no mind. My heart was racing, the blood was roaring in my ears, and my throat went dry. Shaking, I approached Carmen, my voice breaking. In which vacant lot, ma'am?" "To what hospital?" Carmen looked at me and her curiosity turned to pity. "In the vacant lot off the highway to San Antonio, ma'am. They took him to County General. They say he's in very bad shape, but no family has come yet." "Do you know him?" I didn't answer, just shook my head, holding back tears. I left the basket on the ground, left all the vegetables, and practically ran out of the market, stumbling on the cobblestones. I ran to the bus stop, not thinking, just knowing I had to get there, that I had to see if that man was my Ethan. On the bus to the city, I sat curled up in a corner, clutching my rosary so tightly it left marks on my palm. The landscape blurred past the window, but I saw nothing but Ethan's face, his smile, his warm voice when he called me Mom, and even the stray words about the divorce I'd found in his room. My heart would race one moment and seem to stop the next. I had hope, but also a terrible fear. Hope that the injured man was Ethan, that he was still alive. But at the same time, I was afraid to face the truth, afraid that those wounds had something to do with the stained knife, with Sarah, with the mysterious man Mrs. Gable saw. I prayed under my breath, asking the good Lord to give me strength, but deep down, I knew that whatever the truth was, it was going to change everything. County General Hospital appeared before me, its hallways crowded with people, and a strong smell of disinfectant that filled my nose. I practically ran to the reception desk and grabbed a young nurse's arm, saying breathlessly, "Excuse me, miss, did you admit an unidentified male patient a few days ago? One they found badly injured in a vacant lot." The nurse looked at me, a little surprised by my desperation, then checked a logbook. "Yes, there is one, Mom," she said in a calm voice. "About 30 years old with multiple stab wounds. A farmer found him in a vacant lot near the highway. Are you a relative?" I didn't answer, just begged her, "Please, let me see him. I have to know." The nurse led me down long hallways, her shoes echoing with a steady rhythm, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. The heavy room door swung open, and the cold white light illuminated everything. On the bed, a thin man was lying with tight white bandages wrapped around his chest, breathing with difficulty through an oxygen mask. I approached, each step feeling like it weighed a ton. And then I saw his face, and my heart shattered into a million pieces. Ethan! It was my son. His face was pale, his lips dry and chapped, but it was Ethan, the son I had given birth to, raised, and loved more than my own life. I ran to him, took his thin hand, and the tears came like a river. Ethan, my son, I said through sobs, my voice broken. As if he sensed I was there, Ethan's eyelids flickered. He opened his eyes slowly. His gaze was cloudy, but he still recognized me. A weak word escaped his dry lips, Mom. Just that one word. But it was enough to make me weep uncontrollably. I leaned in, pressing my ear to his mouth as my tears fell onto the white sheet. Son, what happened to you? Who did this to you? I tried to keep my voice from shaking, but how could I? When my whole body was trembling with pain and fear. I needed to know the truth, no matter how horrible it was. Ethan struggled to swallow. His breathing was ragged, and every word he spoke seemed to cost him all the strength he had left. I found out. Sarah was cheating on me. His voice was hoarse, weak, but every word was like a stab to my heart. I couldn't take it anymore. I told her I wanted a divorce, and that I was going to fight for custody of Annie. She begged me, and then she threatened me. In the end, while we were arguing, she stabbed me with a knife. I fell to the floor. Ethan stopped, closing his eyes tightly, as if the memory was too painful to continue. I squeezed his hand, the tears still streaming, soaking my sleeve. Sarah, the daughter-in-law I had loved, treated like my own daughter, had stabbed Ethan. I didn't want to believe it, but the image of the stained knife, the shirt in the black sack, appeared so clearly in my mind, confirming my son's words. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to go on, his voice raspy. Sarah thought I was dead. She called some guy. I only caught the name Victor. The two of them loaded me into a car and went to dump me in that vacant lot to die. At that moment, I was still conscious. I kept my eyes shut tight and played dead. Otherwise, they would have finished me off. He stopped, looking at me with eyes full of fear. You and Annie, you're in danger too. Ethan's words were like an icy wind that made me tremble with terror. I thought of Annie, my little granddaughter with her bright smile, who was at home with Sarah. If Sarah could do this to Ethan, would she be capable of hurting Annie? The thought made my heart stop. A nurse came in with a tray to change his bandages. I stepped back, but never took my eyes off Ethan. Underneath the white gauze, the long, deep wound on his chest was red and swollen, a cruel reminder of what he had suffered. The nurse worked carefully, but every time Ethan let out a soft groan of pain, I felt as if I were the one being stabbed. When the nurse left, Ethan motioned for me to come closer and said in a weak but firm voice, Mom, you have to be very careful. Don't let them know I'm alive, no matter what. I need time to recover, and then we're going to make them pay. His gaze, though cloudy, still had a spark of determination, like a small flame that hadn't gone out. I nodded, quickly drying my tears. But inside, I made a vow, as solid as a rock. Son, I will protect you and Annie. I won't let them get away with this. I squeezed Ethan's hand, feeling his weak grip in return, as a promise that together we would get through this. A few days after finding Ethan in the hospital, I felt like I was living in a long nightmare, where every moment was heavy and tense. Watching my son recover little by little, being able to sit up and talk, even though he was still weak, was the only comfort in the midst of the storm in my soul. But I knew we couldn't just stop at having found Ethan. The truth of what Sarah and that man named Victor had done had to come to light. I couldn't let them go on living as if nothing had happened. Couldn't let them threaten Ethan's and Annie's lives for one more day. That morning, I helped Ethan walk to the county sheriff's office. His arm trembled as he leaned on me, but his gaze was steady, like that little flame I used to see in him as a boy when he was determined to do something, no matter how hard it was. I pushed open the old wooden door of the station, and the smell of old paper and burnt coffee filled my nose. Sheriff Thompson, a middle-aged man with a thick mustache, looked up from his desk and glanced at us indifferently. How can I help you? He asked, his voice monotone, as if we were just another unimportant case of the day. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "This isn't just anything," I said, gesturing to Ethan, who was sitting in a chair, his shirt revealing a piece of the white bandage on his chest. "My son was nearly killed. This isn't some domestic dispute, it's attempted murder." My voice came out louder than I intended, as if all the pain and fear of the past few days had exploded into words. Sheriff Thompson frowned, his gaze shifting from me to Ethan, but still with a hint of doubt. "I understand you two fought a lot," he said, flipping through some papers on his desk. "Probably just a family squabble, ma'am. Can't be that serious." I slammed my hand on the desk, unable to contain myself any longer. "Not that serious? Look at my son." I pointed to the wound on Ethan's chest, my voice trembling with rage and pain. "My daughter-in-law stabbed him and dumped him in a vacant lot to die. You call that a family squabble?" Ethan, though weak, lifted his head, his gaze cloudy but full of determination. He told the horrible story, and every word broke my heart all over again. "Sarah, my wife, stabbed me after I told her I wanted a divorce and custody of my daughter. She called a man named Victor, and the two of them took me to the vacant lot, thinking I was already dead. If I hadn't pretended to be unconscious, I wouldn't be here now," I added, my voice shaky but firm. "And I, with my own two eyes, saw Sarah bury the knife and a shirt covered in a ghastly red stain in our garden. That's the weapon, I'm sure of it." Sheriff Thompson stopped flipping through his papers, and his expression turned serious. He nodded slowly, as if he finally understood this wasn't just some story. "All right," he said, his voice now graver. "We'll investigate. I'll send a plainclothes team to your ranch today to verify." He motioned to a young deputy nearby, and I saw them begin to talk, in low but urgent tones. They led us to a small waiting room with stained walls and the smell of stale cigarette smoke. Time passed slowly, each minute feeling like an hour. I sat next to Ethan, holding his hand, feeling his weak grip as a reminder that he was alive, that he was here with me. But inside, I couldn't stop worrying. What if Sarah found out Ethan was alive? Would she do something to Annie to cover up a crime? I thought of my little granddaughter at home with Sarah, and my heart clenched. "Son," I whispered, "I won't let anyone hurt you or Annie." Ethan nodded, his face pale but with a spark of hope in his eyes. "I know, Mom," he said, his voice hoarse. "I trust you." That afternoon, as the sun began to set, a young deputy ran into the waiting room, a sealed evidence bag in his hand. Inside, I saw the kitchen knife and the shirt with a ghastly red stain, the same things I had dug up in the garden that night. My heart pounded when the deputy informed Sheriff Thompson, "Preliminary results show the only fingerprint on the knife matches that of Sarah Miller. The stain on the shirt is being analyzed, but it appears consistent with Mr. Ethan Miller's blood type." I felt a weight lift off me, as if part of the burden I'd been carrying on my shoulders was gone. But at the same time, the pain returned, because now I was certain that Sarah, the daughter-in-law I had loved, was the one who had tried to kill my son. Sheriff Thompson stood up, his face serious. "There's sufficient evidence to proceed with an arrest and investigation," he said firmly. Just then, the radio on his desk crackled and a detective's voice came through, rushed. "The target, Sarah Miller, has just left the ranch. She's meeting a man at the diner on the highway. It looks like she spotted our presence, and they're preparing to flee in a car." I heard that and felt my heart stop. Was Sarah trying to escape with this Victor person? I clutched the rosary in my pocket, praying they would catch them before they disappeared. Thompson gave the order immediately, his voice sharp. "Surround them and arrest them both now. Don't let them get away." I sat in silence, nervously fidgeting with the beads of my rosary, each one like a prayer for justice. Ethan closed his eyes, his pale face relaxing slightly. He whispered, his voice weak but full of determination, "Finally, it's about time, Mom." I squeezed my son's hand, feeling the faint warmth from it, and I knew that the truth, however painful, was finally coming to light. Less than 15 minutes later, the radio crackled again. The detective's voice was excited. "We've apprehended Sarah Miller and the man accompanying her. We suspect he is Victor Salazar. Both are being transported to the station." I let out a breath, feeling my whole body go limp with relief. On the morning of the trial, I woke up while it was still dark, my heart heavy as a stone. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at my gray hair and the deep wrinkles on my face, and wondered how I would ever face this day. The trial at the county courthouse wasn't just where the truth would be revealed, but also where I would have to look Sarah in the face, the woman who was my daughter-in-law, the woman who nearly took my son's life. I clutched my rosary, praying for strength, not just for me, but for Ethan and Annie, the people I loved most. Ethan and I arrived at the courthouse early. He, though better, still needed a cane to walk, and the wound in his chest made him stoop a little with each step. Seeing my son, who used to be as strong as a cornstalk in the field, now so weak and tired, broke my soul. Outside the courthouse, a swarm of reporters already surrounded us, the flashes of their cameras firing non-stop, as if they wanted to devour us. I took Ethan's hand and whispered, "Son, we're going to get through this. Justice is on our side." Ethan nodded, his gaze firm, though his face was still pale. "I trust you, Mom," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. When the squad car carrying Sarah and Victor arrived, I felt my whole body tremble. They got out, handcuffed, their heads bowed, but I still caught Sarah's nervous glance, as if she were looking for a way to escape. Victor, this man I had never seen before, was tall and looked arrogant, but his eyes couldn't hide his worry either. I squeezed Ethan's hand, trying to hold back my tears. These were the people who almost took my son from me, who tore my family apart. I wanted to scream at them, to run up and confront them, but I knew that today, the truth would speak for me. In the courtroom, the silence was so heavy you could cut it with a knife. The old wooden benches were filled with people, from witnesses to curious townfolk. I sat next to Ethan, still holding his hand, feeling his weak grip as if he were encouraging me. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man with a strong voice, stood to present the case. He laid out the undeniable evidence before the judge. The kitchen knife with Sarah's fingerprints, the shirt with the ghastly red stain dug up from the garden, and the lab report confirming the red liquid on the shirt was Ethan's. With every piece of evidence presented, I felt my heart clench, as if I were reliving that horrible night I dug up the black sack. Mr. Miller, the farmer who found Ethan, stood to testify. His voice trembled a little, but it was clear. "I was grazing my cows when I saw a man lying there, unconscious, in the middle of the vacant lot. He was covered in blood. I thought he was already dead. I called for help and we got him to the hospital right away. If I'd gotten there any later, he surely wouldn't have made it." Mr. Miller's words were like a razor, and I had to bite my lip to keep from crying. I looked at Ethan and saw he had closed his eyes, his face tense, as if trying to endure the pain of hearing that story again. Then it was Ethan's turn. He stood, leaning on his cane, his voice still shaky but full of conviction. It was my wife, Sarah Miller, who stabbed me after I told her I wanted a divorce and custody of my daughter. She called her lover, Victor Salazar, to help her dump me in the vacant lot, thinking I was already dead. Ethan's voice echoed in the courtroom, stronger than I expected, as if he had gathered all his strength to speak the truth. I clutched my rosary as tears streamed silently down my face. My son, though he had nearly lost his life, was there, facing those who had betrayed him. Suddenly, Sarah burst into tears, falling to her knees before the judge. "It's not true!" she screamed, her voice broken with panic. "He forced me. That day I had been drinking after a fight with my husband, and things got out of hand. It was supposed to end there, but Victor threatened me. He said if I didn't keep seeing him, he would tell everyone." She pointed at Victor, her face bathed in tears, but I saw only falsehood in every one of them. I remembered her cold gaze when I asked about Ethan, her whispers in the night, and my heart ached to think she was once part of my family. Victor jumped to his feet, slamming his hand on the table, his face red with rage. "Liar! She's the one who called me, begging me to help her cover up her crime. I only did what she asked. I didn't stab anyone." His voice was loud, full of anger but also fear. The whole courtroom erupted, the murmurs of the crowd like the roar of the sea. I just sat there listening to them blame each other and felt a deep sadness. They had not only betrayed Ethan, but also the trust of me, of Annie, of this entire family. The prosecutor continued presenting evidence. Mrs. Gable's testimony, recounting the times she saw Sarah with the strange man at the gate. The medical report confirming that the stab wounds on Ethan's body were not an accident, but an intentional act. Each piece of evidence was like another piece of the puzzle, completing the picture of Sarah and Victor's crime. Sarah lowered her head, her hands trembling, unable to say another word. Victor kept trying to deny his guilt, but the sweat pouring down his forehead gave him away. I looked at them, these people who were once part of our lives, now standing before the law, and I felt a mix of pain and relief. Pain for the betrayal, relief because the truth was finally coming to light. Finally, the judge, a woman with a serious face, rose to give the sentence. Her voice was clear and firm. Sarah Miller, guilty of attempted murder, is sentenced to 15 years in prison. Victor Salazar, accomplice in the cover-up of a felony and aiding in the commission of the same, is sentenced to 7 years in prison. The strike of the gavel echoed like the final period on a long nightmare. The courtroom fell silent. The only sounds were Sarah's sobs and the insults Victor muttered under his breath. As they were led away, Sarah turned to look at Ethan and me. Her gaze was no longer one of remorse, but of a bone-chilling hatred, as if she still couldn't accept the consequences of her actions. I squeezed Ethan's hand, giving him strength, and felt his weak grip in return. "Mom," Ethan whispered, his voice hoarse, "it's finally over." I nodded, tears streaming down my face, but this time they were tears of release. I knew that in the end, justice had been served. A few months after the trial, peace slowly began to return to our ranch. The cornfields kept growing strong under the golden Texas sun, as if they had never seen such dark days. Every morning as the sun rose, I would stand in the yard, taking a deep breath of the fresh air, feeling life slowly coming back. But inside, I knew that the scars, not just the one on Ethan's chest, but also the ones on my heart and on Annie's, would never completely fade. They were a part of us, a reminder of what we had overcome and the strength we had found in each other. Ethan was almost fully recovered. The long scar on his chest, reddish and puckered, was the mark of a horrible night, but he didn't let that scar define him. I would watch him, now able to pick up the hoe to work in the garden, fix the fence, or carry the heavy sacks of corn, and my heart would fill with a pride mixed with sadness. "Mom," he told me one afternoon as we sat in the kitchen, "I don't want Annie to grow up in fear. I want her to see her father as strong, to know that we can overcome anything." I nodded, and tears slipped out silently, but this time they were tears of hope. Annie, my little granddaughter, was back to running and playing in the yard, her bright laughter sounding like silver bells, chasing away the ghosts of the past. In the first few days after the trial, she would often curl up beside me, and with her round eyes she would ask, "Where did Mommy go, Grandma? Is the new daddy coming back?" Each question was like a knife, and I had to bite my lip to keep from crying. I would just hug her tight and whisper, "Your mommy had to go far away for a while, my love, but your grandma and your daddy will always be here with you." Little by little, Annie stopped asking about her mother or the new daddy. Maybe she was too young to understand it all, but I knew that deep down, she was also trying to heal in her own childish way. I continued to wake up early every day, as has been my habit for years. I'd make a pot of hot grits, and the smell of corn would fill the kitchen, mingling with the crowing of the roosters and the sound of the wind through the fields. These familiar sounds of ranch life, though simple, were like medicine for my soul. I would stand by the stove, stirring the grits, and think about the months that had passed, the sleepless nights filled with fear, the hours in the hospital holding Ethan's hand, praying for him to wake up. Now, when I looked out into the yard and saw Ethan and Annie playing together, I felt a bit of peace returning, though I knew the road ahead still had its challenges. Ethan decided to reopen the small family distillery, a dream he'd told me about since he was young. One night, sitting on the porch, he looked at me with bright eyes. "I want Annie to grow up in a place that's safe and that she can be proud of. Mom, I want her to know that her dad and her grandma will always be there for her. The distillery isn't just about making money. It's about keeping our traditions alive so she has something that reminds her of her family." I smiled and put a hand on his shoulder. "Son, I know you'll make it happen. And I'll always be here, with you and Annie." Ethan's words were like a promise, not just to Annie, but to me as well, that we were going to rebuild everything from the ashes. Every now and then, Mr. Miller and Mrs. Gable would visit, bringing us something from their garden, a basket of ripe tomatoes or some soft, fragrant avocados. One time, while Mr. Miller was having coffee with us, he clapped Ethan on the shoulder and smiled warmly. "You were given a second chance at life, Ethan. Cherish it and cherish the people who love you." Ethan nodded, a look of gratitude on his face. "I'll never forget what you did for me, Mr. Miller," he said, his voice deep. "If it weren't for you, I might not be here now." Seeing them, I felt my heart warm, as if the kindness of people still existed in the midst of so much pain and loss. Every weekend, I took Annie to the small church in town. She would hold my hand and skip along, telling me about her games at school. In the church, under the dim light of the candles, I would kneel and light a candle for Ethan, one for Annie, and one for Sarah's lost soul. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive her completely, but I know that forgiveness, as hard as it is the only way my family and I can move on. I prayed for Sarah, not because she deserved it, but because I didn't want my heart to live as a prisoner of resentment. I wanted Annie to grow up in a home filled with love, not bitterness. At night, I often sit on the porch, watching the distant lights of the city. The moon illuminates the cornfield, making it shimmer like jewels. I think about what we lost: trust, peace, and a part of our family. But I also think about what we kept: Ethan, Annie, and the love we have for each other. Annie's laughter drifts from inside the house, clear and full of hope, like a song that calms my heart. "Grandma, will you make me corn cakes tomorrow?" she shouts, running to hug me. I laugh and pull her close, feeling her warmth. "Of course, my love. I'll make you a whole basket full." I close my eyes, feeling the night wind in my gray hair, with a calm I haven't felt in a long time. Life shook us with horrible things, but now we are learning to heal. I know there will be hard days, moments when Annie asks about her mother, or nights when Ethan wakes up from a nightmare. But I also know that as long as we have each other, we will get through it all. After everything that happened, I just want to leave a message for everyone. In life, the most dangerous things are not the storms outside, but the lies and betrayals that hide within your own family. The truth, no matter how cruel, must come to light, because hiding it only makes the wound deeper and drags innocent people into a whirlwind of suffering. I learned that only love, strength, and the will to protect your own give you the power to overcome the darkest days. Justice may be slow, but it arrives in the end, and when it does, the important thing is not to let your heart fill with hate, so you can keep living, keep loving, and so that children can grow up in the light of truth and not in the shadow of a lie. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identity of the people involved. We don't tell this to judge, but in the hope that someone might listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to face it all to get your voice back? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a candle that can light the way for someone else. God always blesses, and I am convinced that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the end screen, I'm leaving you two of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.